Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This week I have a very special guest. His name is Anthony Bruno. So Anthony Bruno is a passionate sportscaster, content creator, and social media specialist currently working for Pinnacle in the sports betting industry. He has a decade of professional experience on air and live television, covering some of the biggest sports stories locally, nationally, and around the world for Sportsnet and global news. He prides himself on his versatility as a broadcaster and his in-depth knowledge of all the major sports. He is also very active in the digital space, where he has built a growing community of passionate sports fans through his creativity, authenticity, and expertise. You can find his work on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'll put the links to his social handles in the description down below for you all to go and subscribe. When he is not on the air, he enjoys playing hockey, baseball, football, and golf, and his number one guilty pleasure is reality TV. He has studied at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson University, obtaining a bachelor's degree in radio and television with a minor in English, and graduated with honors. And now Anthony Bruno joins me live. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. First of all, thank you for the intro, Daniel. That was pretty awesome. I could see
No
you did some
worries.
solid research on me, so I'm
Yes,
uh,
yes.
I'm happy to join the show, man.
No worries. Thank you for coming on, Anthony Bruno. Everyone, for those of you who don't know, I started watching him literally on Sportsnet as a update guy some of the times, and on Global News as well. He's a very famous sports journalist here in the GTA Toronto area. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, man. I've had a kind of a crazy career journey up to this point. I've had a lot of different stops. I've done a lot of different things, and I'm still chugging along, which is nice. So I'm happy to chat it up with you today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I'm gonna first begin by saying now, because I also like look at your content on TikTok a lot. The Anthony Bruno show. You post a lot of videos, and that's how I got more consumed towards your content as well. Kind of drawn into your content. But do you think like right now, like the whole content creation industry is now the new norm of journalism?
Absolutely. When people reach out to me, and I should say more so when students reach out to me and say, "Hey, like, how do I break into the industry? What do you think I should do? Like, I want to get into sports broadcasting or sports media, whatever it may be." My number one piece of advice is to create their own content because it's a different beast. Like, when I was breaking into the industry back in like 2010, 2011, like when I was going to Ryerson and now TMU, obviously,
Yes.
it was just a completely different landscape. I was volunteering at Rogers TV Toronto, where I was able to go on the air. I was hosting a high school sports show called High School Sports Zone, and it was amazing. Like that's where I got all my experience. I learned how to read off a teleprompter, how to do reporting in the field, how to host a show at the desk. But that stuff is just not available anymore for the most part for students that want to get into broadcasting. Now, it does exist in certain markets, depending where you are. In the GTA, it's not really a possibility anymore. But nowadays, instead of that, all you really have to do is turn on the camera, turn on your microphone, and start creating your own content because
Exactly.
that's how you can get out there. That's how you can get noticed. That's how you can build your following and build your influence online. And that's what it's all about these days, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Is essentially building your own audience and then being able to leverage that, whether that's to, you know, make money from brand deals or even leverage that to get a job. There's so many different things that you can do with it. I just think it's very powerful to create your own content um, and see where that could take you. Because if you're committed to it and you're consistent, you could essentially accomplish anything you want in this industry.
Exactly. Like I'm just doing this because I've always wanted to do this YouTube channel type of setting and show. I uploaded 4 videos last year and I immediately took them down just because of the negative reception or the amount of hate I might get from the viewership. But I just thought, you know what, Daniel, I'm getting all these beautiful human beings, these great amazing people to come on my show. So ignore the haters. It is what it is. But like you said, it's a powerhouse tool. Honestly, you can just literally with a flick of a button, a flick of a light switch, you can just create content. And literally, I talked to Nima Nas, who was my last guest last week, about this. He posted a video about impersonating Gary Vee, and he actually met Gary Vee. So it's that powerful, like you said.
Oh yeah, and he's hilarious, by the way. I've been
Yeah,
watching
he's a
his
good guy.
videos for the
Yeah,
last few years. That's incredible that you got him on the show. But no, I
yeah,
mean,
no.
everybody gets hate. Like I remember I was pretty terrified, to be honest with you. Like when I first started my YouTube channel, even though I've been in broadcasting for a long time, like people think I just sort of appeared out of nowhere and I just started making content on the internet, which to a certain degree it is true, but I've been working in broadcasting for over a decade, or at least
Yeah,
I was working in broadcasting for over a decade. My role has
right,
slightly changed now as I work for Pinnacle Sportsbook.
right.
But yeah, like when I remember when I first launched my YouTube channel, like I was terrified. I'm like, man, I don't know how this is gonna go. Are people gonna watch this? Are people gonna hate me? And when you first start out, it's kind of scary, right? Because you have these
For sure.
ideas and you want to start posting this content, but you don't know how it's going to get received. And you just have to get through that initial hurdle and
Right.
keep going. To this day, I mean, you should see some of the comments I get on my videos and my DMs. I mean, people are insane, honestly.
I
I
think,
mean,
yeah, I think,
I respond to these people sometimes and I say, listen, like you can, I don't care if you come back at me and you criticize what I'm saying and you disagree with me, but don't get personal and start taking shots at me. Like you don't even know who I am. Like who the
exactly.
hell do you think you are making these like crazy comments to me? Like some of the things that I get is honestly outrageous, but you just have to understand that the people who are negative in the comment section, it's more a reflection of them than it is of you and your content. So I do like that you brought that up because I don't think it gets talked about as much as it should.
Yeah,
And it's just a matter of kind of, staying in your lane, staying focused, not worrying about the outside noise, and just continuing to make things that your audience enjoys to consume.
exactly. Like, um, talking about like the hate and all. It's a part of it. Like you said, you have to get over that first hurdle. Looking back at that 4 videos that I still have, it's in my archives section on my computer. I just grew, literally just grew as a creator. Like this whole setup, this whole everything just kind of grew as time went on. You get better with it. You reach out to people, you become more professional, and you grow up and you learn from your mistakes. And if you learn from your mistakes, you become a better creator, as they say. So yeah, thank you for answering that question. My next one for you is, how do you feel about the Blue Jays' rough exit last year in the postseason? What worked and what ultimately didn't?
The Blue Jays are probably the most frustrating team in Toronto sports
For
right
sure.
now, I would say. And listen, like it's safe to say that you should be equally frustrated with every team to a certain degree. Like, obviously, the Leafs can't make a deep playoff run to save their lives. The Raptors are kind of stuck in limbo right now. But this Blue Jays team, I mean, I think we all expected them to take the next step by now. But over the last few seasons, they have just done nothing in the playoffs. And this season in particular was so disappointing. To score one run in 2 games against the Minnesota Twins was just completely unacceptable. And listen, you could look at all the analytics you want and how great they were defensively and all the gold gloves they won this year. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to hit the baseball in the playoffs. Like, look over the last number of years, the teams that make deep runs, the teams that get to the World Series win the World Series. I'm not saying that pitching and defense is not important. It obviously is. But if you can't string together runs and have big innings and 1 through 9 have guys that are up there who can take the ball out of the park and and rack up extra base hits, it's going to be difficult. I mean, you can look at like the Atlanta Braves, for example. Like they had one of the greatest offenses of all time this past year, and they
Mhm.
even flamed out in the playoffs. But look at Arizona. Like they got to the World Series. Like Corbin Carroll, Gabriel Moreno, former Blue Jay. Like they had a bunch of guys chipping in across the board offensively. And then the same with the Phillies. I mean, they were just mashing the ball. I know the Phillies didn't get to the World Series this year, but Texas, same thing, right? Like
Yeah.
Texas had guys that were mashing 1 through 9. So the thing that frustrates me the most about the Blue Jays is that offensively, I just don't think they're good enough. They took a step back this year. I know no more Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel,
Yep. Yep.
Vladdy had an off season. Chapman wasn't great. Like Springer had a down year. It was just frustrating to see this team, offensively and the struggles that they had. And I think that if they had like their normal offensive season that we've been accustomed to, they probably would have made a deeper run in the playoffs. And the thing is, I don't know if they're honestly capable of that. Like they gotta find a way to just upgrade the offense in the offseason.
Yeah, like for sure. Like you said, it was just a down year. It was very frustrating to watch and consume them just play because when we got George Springer, I'm like, wow, we've actually got like a powerhouse, outfielder that can bring the bat to the plate and also help us defensively as well. Way bigger upgrade than Kevin Pillar, but shout out to Kevin Pillar. He was an amazing outfielder for us back in 2015-16 when we had those playoff runs and we wanted to go to the World Series. We ultimately lost to the World Series champions back-to-back years, right? With the Royals being the first,
That's right.
and then the Indians being the ones after. But if they would have beat those teams, we would have gone back-to-back World Series champs. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and like those teams, like looking back, they were great offensive teams, like with Bautista,
Yeah,
Donaldson, Encarnacion,
yeah,
like even like the
Reed.
complementary pieces
Yeah,
like Russell Martin and like Justin Smoke he was a good hitter too, right? I know he
Saunders.
doesn't get a ton of love, but
No.
you know, go down the list, right? Like they had so many guys that could hit the ball out of the park. Like I said, extra base hits. Now it's like they've put so much attention into pitching and defense.
Mhm.
And I just wish like you could almost put together the offenses from like those runs from 2015 and 2016 with the
Yeah,
pitching staff and the defense that they have now. This team
yeah,
would be unbelievable, right?
yeah.
So, and again, like I get what they're trying to do. Like pitching and defense is very important, and the Jays pitching and defense was great this year. But you can't score one run in two playoff games and
No,
expect
you
to
can't. You
make
can't.
a run to the World Series. So
No, you can't.
they got some work to do.
Yeah, they do because with that offense on paper, we look stacked. But in the real world reality of it, when we can only get a run in those two games, like you said, against the Twins, that's unbelievable. Like that's inexcusable. Like that you can't just come up to the plate and have Springer, Vladdy and Bo and Kevin Biggio and all the rest of the guys. And powerhouse guys, they can swing the bat in the season. They were great. It's just funny. Like Anthony, you can level with me here. Every Toronto sports team in the season, they're amazing. On paper, they're stacked in the season. They do so well. But then the playoffs come, it's like these two little gods came from heaven down on them and then just control them. But they control them so poorly that they don't even capitalize on their best opportunities in the playoffs. And you know that they can go on to the next rounds. They just, have massive hiccups. What do you think about that?
Yeah, honestly, it's gotten to the point where I just think Toronto sports just might be forever cursed. Like, listen, I know the Raptors won the title in 2019. Like, I get it. That was incredible.
That was
But
historic.
there's been so many other moments across the board with all of these other Toronto sports teams. And listen, I'm not including like the Argos and TFC.
No, no, no,
Not that
no.
I want to completely dismiss them, but it doesn't count as much,
Sure,
honestly, as like the major North American sports.
for sure.
And there's just been so many moments, even with the Blue Jays, like Vladdy and Bo should have so much better postseason numbers than they do. Like Gabriel Moreno, within his first 8 postseason at bats for the Diamondbacks this year, like
Yep.
literally outdid the production of Vlad Guerrero and Bo in their postseason careers. Like it's just crazy to me. And I know like
Yeah.
looking back, like when that trade first happened, I wasn't like totally against it. I thought the Jays overpaid and I thought Varsho would be better. But then to see what Moreno did in the playoffs and even Lourdes Gurriel Jr., he had his moments for the D backs as well. And
Yeah.
then to see Vladdy and Bo just like not do anything really, like no home runs, no extra base hits, like with runners in scoring position. Go down the list. Like no one can hit the ball with runners in scoring position for
Yeah.
this Blue Jays team. And it was just so frustrating to watch because as you said, on paper, they're really good. Like you look at the names on paper in
It's
that
unreal,
lineup, you're
yeah.
like, oh my God, this should be like one of the best offenses in baseball. And it just
Like
didn't come together like we all expected.
like Anthony, I remember in 15-16, even now with our elite offense, like we thought that, okay, like Donaldson, Bautista, and Encarnacion, when they left, the offense would, dummy down, and everything would be just, scratch from the start, because we had to build up a new foundation, bring in new guys like we did with Bo, Vladdy, and Kevin Biggio. But the Jays offense on paper, if teams look at them, they're shaking before they even come to the diamond, right? Because it's that elite. But if they come, like if a pitcher looks at, okay, like I have Springer next, and then I have Vladdy, and then I have Bo, they're gonna shake, right? They're gonna be scared, of course. But if the team's gonna play like they did against the Twins with only one run, then they're gonna be like, what the hell? On paper, they're like this. It's gonna be confusing for them. So they got to make more roster moves. That goes into my next question: what roster moves need to be happened over this, off season ahead of the next season? What players do they need to get in order to be a prominent team for next season?
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of like specific players they should go out and get, I don't know if I have like, a list of like two or three specific players, but it's like I alluded to, like this team needs to find a way to upgrade offensively because the pitching staff is good.
Yes.
And, it's unfortunate what happened to Alek Manoah because this dude was like in the Cy Young conversation 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, he
And then this
was.
past season just fell off a cliff. And now who the hell knows if he's going to be able to get back to what he used
Yeah.
to be. And
Yeah.
that's a problem. But like Chapman's going to be gone. You would assume he's going to sign a big free agent contract with someone. I
For
mean, I
sure.
know he hasn't been like, since he had like a couple good offensive seasons with Oakland. And since then, he hasn't been great offensively, but he's a gold glove arm at third base. He
Yep.
can still pop like 20 to 25 home runs. Someone's going to pay him. So like the Jays are going to lose Chapman. They already lost Marcus Simeon a couple of
Yeah.
years ago to
Yeah.
Texas,
He was a
right?
big loss. He was a big loss in my opinion. He was outstanding for us.
Oh, he was amazing. And listen, like I get why the Jays didn't sign him. He signed a $175 million contract, and the Jays are probably thinking like, we got to pay Vladdy, we got to pay
Yeah.
Bo, like we
Yeah.
got to pay Alek Manoah, who doesn't look like he's going to get the bag at this point. But they
Right.
got to find a way to upgrade offensively. Like first of
Yeah.
all, they need a third baseman now that Chapman's gone. They need another middle of the bat or middle of the order guy because
Utility man. Yeah.
losing Teoscar Hernandez, like I know Teoscar didn't have like the greatest season with Seattle this past year, but man, like that was a really good bat in the middle of the
I
lineup.
don't
Like
know
look
why
what
they
he did
yeah. I
in
don't
the
know why they
playoffs two
even did
years
that.
ago
Yeah, I don't even know why they did that, because Teoscar helped us in the playoffs against what was it?
with Seattle.
With Seattle, right? With Seattle, he got that home run for us. But besides that, he was an amazing just player to be around. He gave up good vibes. He was one of the fan favorites in Toronto. I just
Oh
was
yeah.
completely shocked why we gave him up for a pitcher that's not even performing that well.
Yeah, exactly. That Eric Swanson. And it's like, listen, I get it. Like his, again, going back to the analytics, I understand like his numbers are good. He's a solid reliever, but when you're losing a presence like that in the middle of the order, it hurts. And then when you combine that with like George Springer not having a great season, with
Right,
Vladdy struggling most of the season,
right.
and now you would remove a big bat from the middle of your order, it's going to hurt. And I know there's rumors that they're going after Joey Votto. I love Joey Votto. I'm like one of his biggest fans, but the dude's like 40 years old at this point. I'm not sure how much that's going to help this team. It would be a
Right.
great story. The vibes would be amazing,
Yeah.
but they got to find a way to go out there and acquire an impact bat who can
Yeah.
really strike some fear into opposing pitching staffs in the middle of the lineup that you can, you know, pair up with Vladdy and Bo and George Springer at the top. So that's what they got to find a way to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because before our offense wasn't the best. Now it's like pretty good. I'm talking like before, like Bautista and Donaldson and Encarnacion. Now, like the whole movement when they came in, they kind of put the new, foundation for everyone to just, become more offensive. Make this whole team more of an offensive kind of team instead of defense. And then our defense lacked. And we are like, okay, we got to get a pitcher. So we got pitchers, and now our offense is lacking. So it's both of them never balance out.
Exactly. It's like
Unfortunately.
they were overcompensating, right? It's like,
Exactly.
oh, now we need more defense, and now let's get rid of our offense to
Right.
get more defense. Oh, now we can't hit. So it's like, man, I know people are frustrated with Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, and rightfully
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
because
We
they
are.
they got to right the ship here.
We are, because I'm frustrated as a Jays fan too. Because if I look back to 15, 16, it was just not a long time ago. 7 years ago wasn't that long ago. We were a great team. given that we did lose, Donaldson, and then the ripple effect kind of happened with Bautista and Encarnacion made exits from Toronto. But the thing is, when you get this team on paper, like we discussed, they're offensive giants, but they can't capitalize in reality on their, playoff moments. If this happens, I think Mark or Ross has to leave because this is unacceptable. You can't just have, the same routine over and over and over again. People are going to get bored out of their minds, going to get frustrated. Just like the Leafs a couple years ago in 2013-14, I remember the fans were really frustrated. They kept throwing their jerseys, burning them, throwing their hats on the ice, saying, we have enough about the management. We need new people. And they did. They brought Dubas, they brought Brandon Shanahan, but we need to have more of just Ross and Mark providing us with something, because I know if you look at the landscape of baseball and just Toronto sports in general, Anthony, you can level with me here. The amount of money the players get in America is much higher than what they get in Canada. Plus, they don't have to pay taxes, right? Because in America they don't have to pay tax. Here they do. But what do you think about this whole management behind the Jays, the Jays roster?
Yeah, it's frustrating because I actually had really high hopes for Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins when they came over from Cleveland, because I actually
Right.
thought they did a really nice job with now they're the Cleveland Guardians. They obviously used to
Yeah.
be the Cleveland Indians, but I thought they did a nice job like building that team with sort of limited resources. Like obviously that franchise does not have the same resources as the Yankees and Red Sox and Dodgers and the Jays for that matter, right? So
Right.
then they come to Toronto. They kept preaching how like they have all these new resources at their disposal. You had like these great young players coming through the system in Guerrero and Bichette and Biggio to a certain extent. I know he's not on the same level as those players as
Mm-hmm.
as a talent, but
True.
then you add in like Alec Manoah, so it's like then you had this infusion of all these young players, and they just have not been able to figure it out how to like build around them properly. And it's like you said, you can't keep running it back with
Yeah, you
those two.
can.
Like I
You can.
thought honestly there was a chance that at least Ross Atkins was going to get fired after what just happened. Even John Schneider, for that matter, the manager
Right.
of the Blue Jays.
Right.
But I mean, they're running it back again, which is probably very frustrating to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we'll see. We'll see what they do in the offseason, because the offseason is still young
Mm-hmm.
and maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're going to make a big splash, but we need to see results, because if the results don't come, especially this coming season, I mean, what are we even doing here? You're going to
Yeah, I
have to look
agree.
elsewhere and try to find new management that could figure this out for the Jays.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think just running it back one more year, okay. I think this is the last straw, Anthony. If they don't go into the playoffs at all, Ross is getting fired. If they get into a wild card, and if they get that wild card, they advance from the wild card into the ALDS. The ALDS is a good place to be. They have to get into the ALCS for Ross to still be in the organization next year. Because if they just get into the wild card spot, okay, one game, but they need a full series to make sure, okay, how are we going to assess the whole team, right? Because only one game is not going to make a difference. Okay, get one run, win the game. Okay, but can you actually go into a playoff run? Can you get those, big time innings, get into the bottom of the ninth, get into those big innings and capitalize on those opportunities? We have to do that. If they don't, Ross and Mark are going to shipped off, and I'll be happy if they do. If they don't, I'm honestly like you said, I was looking forward for the Blue Jays, organization acquiring Mark and Ross when they were on Cleveland, bringing them in Toronto, because they did pretty well for the Cleveland organization. But they're not just they brought big names like Hyunjin Ryu, but he got injured and he's a free agent right this year, if I'm not mistaken. So what can you do? You bring names, but they get injured, and you have an amazing offensive team on paper, but you can't capitalize. So something's wrong here in the equation.
Yeah, it gets to a point where you only get a certain amount of time, honestly, to build what you want to build. And listen, I think a lot of times in sports, we're a little bit impatient and we want to just, fire coaches and fire GMs and
Right.
fire presidents and things like that.
Right.
But I
Right.
think now, as you said, like they've been here since 2016, when you go back to that last run that the Jays had to the ALCS, and then Anthopoulos is gone, and then these guys come in. It's now
Yeah.
been 7 years. It's not like it's only been like a couple of years. Like they've had their time now, and we've seen them get swept against Tampa. They got swept against Seattle. They got swept against the Twins. It's like, how much
Um,
longer are we going to put up with this? So
yeah,
people are
like
frustrated.
yeah, I called him Santa Pulis because he brought so many good gifts like Tulowitzki, David Price. I'll never forget that year. It gives me goosebumps till this day. But I mean, when Alex left and we brought in Ross as his replacement, okay, he's a really good manager. Like Ross, he was a really good manager for Cleveland. I expect more from him. Like, yeah, he brought in big names like Hyun Ryu, which we needed a big time pitcher. Like our rotation's looking pretty good. Um, but yeah, like they need those, like you said, a utility player, a third baseman. Because when Matt Chapman came in, he kind of took that Josh Donaldson type of role. They both played for the Oakland A's, and they both are similar in somewhat of their nature because they both are big time bats at the plate. But they do need a solid third baseman and a utility man. A couple other guys wouldn't hurt as well. This offense on paper is stacked, but they need more because in reality they can't capitalize. Like I said, what do you think about Shohei Ohtani rumors to Toronto?
Oh, I love that. And here's the thing, like the Jays, like financially, Rogers financially, I should say, like they can afford Shohei Ohtani. And
Yeah,
I think it would be incredible because I think no matter, and I know it's going to be a lot of money, but I feel like you would still get a return on investment just
for
because he's
sure.
such a
Yeah, for sure.
massive star.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I know he's going through injuries right now, and who knows when he's going to be able to pitch again. But I mean, my goodness, if you can bring in that dude, like that would be the perfect solution right there because you're bringing in a middle of the order bat who can hit 40 to 45 home runs, like 1,000 OPS, and then pitches like a Cy Young caliber pitcher. I mean, like he's an alien. He's like he's honestly unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, unless you want to compare him to like Babe Ruth from
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like
yeah.
basically 100 years ago. So it
Yeah.
would be incredible. I'd be fully on board getting Shohei Ohtani, and I know the rumors have been swirling, but I'm just not quite sure if Rogers wants to dish out, what it's going to
Yeah,
take to get this guy because like the numbers seem like astronomical, like
yeah. The numbers
four,
are big.
500 million. I don't know how much it's going to take, but it could be a lot.
Yeah, the numbers are big. But yeah, I feel as if they go out and acquire him, I think it's just going to be him for that off season. Which is going to be okay. People are going to be like, okay, but we need more guys. But we're kind of going on a limb here, saying, okay, we're going to bring this big pitching arm. Even if our offense sucks big time, we have that arm, and he's consistent with his injuries. He's not that, he doesn't get frequent injuries like the rest of our pitchers do. So that's a good arm to get. But again, it's a real gamble. We're short on time, so I'm gonna go to my next kind of questions. It's we're gonna put the Jays aside for now, and we're gonna focus on you and your experience in the industry. So, what was your first experience like in this industry, like Anthony? Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like what I talked about off the top of the show, I started hosting a high school sports show on Rogers TV Toronto, and it was
Mhm.
amazing. Like I got so much experience. They would send me out to professional sporting events. Like I remember the first thing I ever covered was like Hockey Hall of Fame weekend in
Okay.
Toronto. Like the first athlete I ever interviewed was Darcy Tucker,
Oh
and I'm
wow,
like I can't even believe this is happening right now. Like I was just like
that's
throwing
legend.
my mic into this into I was in a scrum at one point, and then some of these guys were just walking by, and I was just grabbing them like Darcy Tucker, Gary Roberts, like go down the list, like all like these former Leafs, and
Mm.
they would send me to some pretty cool events. I got to cover like some charity hockey events in Toronto, and one year it was the lockout year in the NHL. So like all of these guys were in Toronto. They were playing at the Mattamy Athletic Center. And I was
Mhm.
like interviewing like PK Subban and Steven Stamkos. So anyway, I got a lot of experience working at Rogers TV Toronto. And then that led me into the next thing that happened when a lot of people are not familiar with this show because it's been a while and we're actually coming up on the 10-year anniversary. I was on Gillette Drafted, the search for Canada's next sportscaster.
Yes, I
It
remember that. I remember that. I was a kid. I remember that. And you were like you were in the draft and there was like a draft lottery for the sportscaster and then you came on the screen. I'm like, wow, he's like a very good looking guy, but wow, like I'm so happy for him.
But yeah, that's I so I was on season 5 of Gillette Drafted, the search for Canada's next
Right.
sportscaster. It was
Yeah.
a reality show where they went out. It was kind of like American Idol, where
Okay.
they go across the country trying to find Canada's next sportscaster. And I won season 5. So that's how I got like my true like breakout moment in the industry. And when I
Right.
started working for Sportsnet was actually through that show. But honestly, none of that would have been possible if I didn't have like all that experience from Rogers TV and I was able to, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure. Yeah.
make mistakes and learn from my experiences. And then I was on that show and I won it as a 23-year-old. I was the youngest winner in
Wow.
history. And that's
Congrats.
how I got like my big start in sports media. So it was a pretty cool story. But yeah, not a lot of people know that about me. They still think I just kind of came out of nowhere and appeared on their
No, no,
TikTok
yeah.
feed one day.
People just think you just Anthony Bruno, just right in the right in this industry, but it's not like that. It's I remember I watched that Gillette draft, not the show, but I remember the winner was announced on Sportsnet and you were the winner, and I'm like, wow, like good for him, like congrats for being on the show, winning it, being the youngest to win it. Wow, what an honor.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah, yeah. So, but Anthony, I wanted to know, since you were a sports anchor for, Sportsnet and Global News, did you like that? Do you find that more enjoyable than being a content creator, or are both just very much, up your alley?
Yeah, I really enjoy both, honestly. Both
Mhm.
have their pros and cons. I would say the biggest difference is that obviously when you're working for a Sportsnet or a Global News or even like TSN for that matter,
Right.
there are certain things that you can and cannot say. And again, it's not like you're not allowed to like voice your opinions, but when you have your own show and you create your own content, you have the freedom to kind of talk about whatever you want.
Exactly.
Whereas, if you're in a specific role at a specific company, they're obviously great platforms, and I would highly recommend anyone, if anyone got the chance to be an anchor on Sportsnet or TSN. I mean, it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. But there are certain things like let's say you're doing like a highlight show on
Right.
Sportsnet Central.
Right.
You're essentially doing the highlights, you're interviewing guests and things like that. There are certain you can't go in depth maybe on your favorite sport. Let's say you're a big basketball fan or a big baseball fan. You might
True.
not have that same opportunity to go in depth and cover it the way that you want when you compare it to, let's say, hosting your own podcast or creating your own videos on the internet, right? So I think the content creation game gives you a little bit more freedom and creativity.
Right.
But again, I think both have their pros and cons, and both are if you're in sports media, I mean both are great, to
Yeah.
be
Both
honest
are.
with you. Like you can't go wrong. But I
Yeah.
think right now, the way the landscape is looking, I would highly suggest people get into content creation.
For sure. Because that's going to be, like you said, that's the new norm. It's just taken over. Like with a flick of a button switch, you can literally post content and meet the person you're impersonating, which is just fascinating. And it's no one ever thought that this would be happening in the journalism landscape, for that matter. Uh, Anthony, to wrap up the show as we hit the 4 minute mark, I just want to pose one more question towards you. Any words of advice you want to impart on to the future generations who might want to get into the sports media slash betting and content creation industry?
Yeah, first of all, I would say it's really hard. And
Mm.
I don't want to scare people and say don't do this, but I mean, I've been through some very difficult times throughout my career, like a lot of changes. When you think about these different networks, like every year they're making changes, there's different shows, they're bringing in new people. Like it's a very difficult industry to break into. But now I think with, for example, the sports betting industry and how it's come into Ontario and there's legalized betting and there's all this regulation and stuff, it's created a lot more job opportunities, which is pretty
Right.
cool. And
Yeah.
some people don't vibe with betting maybe the same way that I do, and maybe you do, and some of your listeners do.
Sure.
But I think it's created a lot of opportunities for people to break into the industry because honestly, right now when you look at the major networks, obviously there's Sportsnet and TSN, and then you have like the news channels like CBC or City TV. There aren't that many opportunities, so that's why I think looking to get into sports betting, content creation, fantasy sports, or creating your own content on your own channels, I think there's a lot of opportunities in that space. And I would say just do what you're passionate about. If you really like the Raptors, go talk about the Raptors and create content around the Raptors. If
Hmm.
you really like sports betting, go create sports betting content. If you really like the Toronto Maple Leafs, go create content around the Leafs. There's so many opportunities. And I think that if you just try it out and stay consistent, and if you're enjoying what you're doing, then I think it's going to go a long way to you being successful in this industry.
Beautiful, beautiful messages from Anthony. Anthony Bruno, thank you so much for doing this. Bruno, you can follow him on his Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and of course, you can subscribe to his podcast, the Anthony Bruno Show podcast. I'll put the links to his social handles all in the description down for you all below. Anthony Bruno, everyone, thank you so much for doing this, Anthony. I had a great time with you.
Yeah, no problem, Daniel. Thanks a lot. And wishing you all the best on your content creation journey. I will be following along. And thanks a lot for having me on the show.
Thank you, Anthony.